And
Hi, my name's Carolyn Kellogg from the Los Angeles Times, and I'm here with the most excellent Margaret Atwood. Hi, Margaret.
hello, Carolyn.
Margaret Atwood, of course, is the famed novelist, Booker Prize winner, tweeter, and she's joining us today to talk about one of her most recent technology adoptions, which is a serial novel for Byliner called Positron. And you've done 2 episodes, right?
Yes, done two. I've actually done three, but we're just editing the third one. And the third one will therefore be next up. And
So
then,
you've always been an early adopter. What made you want to do a serial novel that's electric only?
well, having been a scholar of 19th century literature, I was well aware that Charles Dickens first published in serial form, and a lot of people did in those days, and they published in little pamphlets of maybe 3 chapters, and those were called numbers. And as characters became popular or not in the numbers, the author would change and give them a bigger role. And that's why Sam Weller in Mr. Pickwick's Papers gets a bigger and bigger role. He was a hit. So it was a little bit like television serials in which one character, people really like that person, so they get a bigger role. And then another person's character may not be so popular, so suddenly they just fall off a bridge. So a little bit like that. But so I wanted to do it for some time, and newspapers and magazines used to publish serials all the time, and they used to excerpt and serialize novels. And then that kind of dried up, but the internet allows it. In fact, the internet in a way encourages it. So it seemed like a good time to try it out to see whether it would work on the internet as a serial. But it's
So
a real serial. We haven't finished it.
and
So
and this positron sets up some things, and it's setting up a sort of futuristic world, right? There's a lingo, there's a culture, it has its own set of rules. As someone who's inventing that world, how do you respond to reader feedback? And I'm curious, how are you getting it? Are you getting it on Twitter, or people using the interface to send you messages?
it's mostly on Twitter, I have to say. I'm not sure that they're yet aware of the user interface that much. And I have a feeling that people who read on Byliner, their main reason for being there is reading. Whereas with some other sites, their main reason for being there is interacting.
Would that be like Wattpad?
I think Wattpad is a pretty good thing, because having been a teenage writer myself, I understand the embarrassment factor. That is, you may be writing a lot of stuff, but you don't necessarily want to put it in your high school yearbook under your own name. Although some of us, without shame, did that. We didn't put,
Some of us, meaning Ms. Atwood sitting in her office?
yeah, some of us made. I did do a little bit of that, but I wrote much more, of course, than I ever put in there. But on Wattpad, you can be Flaming Silver Wings, and nobody need know that it's you. And you also, it's a pretty positive place. So for people having their first go at publishing, in a way, it's not the real world, because in the real world, you publish something and people hurl sort of tomatoes at you. But on Wattpad, they say, I want to hear more, and encouraging things like that.
And
So
so it's mostly teenagers on Wattpad, but it's not built for teenagers.
Well, I think it was built by 2 guys who wanted to be able to read on their phones. And the phones that they had at that moment, which was 2002, you couldn't really read more than maybe a sentence. But the phones have evolved to enable you to read more, and also to write on your phones. And Wattpad, of course, is in 25 countries, and a number of the places where it is You might not have a library, you might not have a landline, you might not have a bookstore, but you've got a phone. So it enables a lot of people who otherwise wouldn't have access to have access to reading and writing and publishing on Wattpad. I put up 5 poems. I think on my own page, I think I've had something like 110,000 reads of them. So,
Wow.
yeah, think of the average readership for a book of poetry in North America. It's quite lovely because some people might not have ventured into the world of poetry before because they thought it was an enclave, maybe them not allowed, too esoteric, etc.
And
Anyway, so yes, Wattpad, but Byliner is
so Wattpad, you're doing a zombie collaboration, right?
doing a two-hander with my mentee, who happens to be the author of an exercise game called Zombies Run. You download the exercise game onto your iPod, and you stick the things in your ears, and you're running along, and it measures your usual rate of running. And then you get a plot in which the zombie apocalypse has taken place, and you're a runner being sent out to get supplies. So you pick up the Band-Aids, you pick up the sports drink or whatever it is you need, and then all of a sudden you've strayed into a zombie-rich area. So the dispatcher says, "Zombies, run!" and you have to run faster and get away from the zombies. So it's pretty fun, and she's going to write me a guest spot on it. I'm going to have a guest spot as a voice on Zombies Run. So we're going to put it in Toronto, and right now we're figuring out where would you hide out from zombies if you were in Toronto.
Maybe a room filled with books.
No, not if it was on the ground floor.
So with Byliner,
Yeah.
So with Byliner, because I want to give it due time, I am curious about when you're building a world, how you build a world that can allow for shifting and incorporating the feedback that you're getting from readers.
That's going to be curious. So it's who do we kill? Now, in Positron, which is based on the world as we know and love it today, a world in which increasingly the prison system is being used as a job creation scheme. So in Positron, they've gone all the way. And inside the town of Consilience, at the center of which is Positron Prison, half of the inhabitants are in prison for 1 month, and then they switch over, and the other half is in prison the next month. There is a catch. They have to get rid of the real criminals. It would just be too criminal to be able to deal with a situation like this. But think of the house sharing. You live in the house for 1 month, and then you go live in the prison. And think of the improvement in the meal plans, because you wouldn't want to be serving up bad food to the prisoners, because next month is going to be their turn, and they would serve bad food to you. So the food's pretty good. The trouble is that once you've signed in, you can't get out. It's a closed system. But it's in the rust bucket and is being presented as the answer to losses of jobs, and anarchy, declining housing values, and all of the things that we see in those areas. And it isn't long before those in charge of it realize that it's actually a pretty good money spinner for them. And we're not going to tell you exactly what they're spending the money on, but it's not something you might wish to be involved in.
It's interesting. You in all of your fiction, you seem to sort of take the temperature of some of the issues of the moment, maybe not even issues that people are paying attention to, and blow them out in ways that is funny or disturbing or like altogether too real. Where does your radar come from?
Oh, reading the newspapers, the TV, more or less the same as everybody else's. The back pages, I like to look at the back pages and then see what moves up to the front.
In the Oryx and Crake series, you have like glow in the dark bunnies because
They exist.
And they actually exist. So,
They existed for a while. It was a magician who wanted a new thing to pull out of the hat. So instead of just a plain old white bunny, one that would fluoresce. And we now have various other fluorescent animals who've got fish that do that. I think we've got a monkey that does that. So it is a jellyfish gene,
and so it's because of like gene controlling the genes, like they implant the genes, and then like does one glow in the dark bunny make baby glow in the dark bunnies?
yes, because you've altered the genetic material. Then they get out, of course, as these things tend to do.
It's so funny because you're laughing, and in some ways it's horrible, but it's also funny when you're sort of envisioning these dystopias when you're working. Do you crack yourself up?
Franz Kafka used to laugh really hard when reading things like The Trial. Yes, I mean, we are like that as human beings, that things can be horrible, but they can also be pretty funny at the same time. And that's probably one of the things that gives us our resilience and gets us through.
When we asked people what they would like to ask you about, the most commonly asked question was people wanted to know about The Handmaid's Tale, and some of the world that you envision in Handmaid's Tale is the woman, the female body is so politicized that it seemed ridiculous, but our world has come right around to it recently. Have you found, were you surprised by some of recent changes around like what male politicians want to do with women's bodies?
It isn't only male politicians. Think of the numbers. The number of women in reproductive mode is always going to be fewer than half of the population. Okay, so they never have voting control. And the female body has been politicized for a very long time. By the way, we go in and out of different modes of it, but who shall have babies, how many babies they shall have, who shall marry whom, what value is set on chastity before marriage, etc. That kind of thing has been around for an extremely long time, usually has to do with property rights, but there are other variations as well. Napoleon wanted lots of cannon fodder for his wars, so he encouraged multiple childbirths. China, of course, has a big population problem, and they have discouraged multiple births, with the result that there are now huge numbers of single men in China who cannot find corresponding women to marry. So it's not just in my book, and it's not just in the United States. It's a human motif that can go one way or the other, depending on what the politicians are looking at and responding to. So tough about that. But I put nothing into the book that people have not already done at some point and in some time.
Do you, so you're not going to take responsibility for all of our crazy American politicians who are doing stuff with wands and exams before women are allowed to have certain surgical procedures?
I'm not going to take responsibility for them, no.
No.
Others, however, have to take responsibility for them and just decide what sort of world they want to live in. And all of the big arguments are about choice of evils issues, by which I mean that if you're given a choice of a strawberry ice cream cone, a vanilla ice cream cone, a chocolate ice cream cone, nobody's going to care very much which one you pick. It's all good. If there's a good thing and a bad thing, and you pick the bad thing, there won't be much argument about it. You shouldn't smoke. But there won't be much argument. Everybody knows it's bad. It's when there are two things, neither of which is really desirable. That's polarizing. Okay, so these kinds of issues just divide people because nobody wants to No, nobody wants to feel that they're not doing the good thing in these issues. So they choose one of them and then they beat up the other one. And you can see that with every, it's a Sophie's Choice kind of thing. You know, which one of your kids are you going to kill?
What do you think the role of dystopia is with in reading or in our culture? Like teenagers now, there's been a big wave of dystopian fiction. I think I'm not sure if grown-ups embrace it quite as much. Where do you think it fits?
Okay, so it depends which kind of dystopia you're looking at, partly. But partly it's like this. We're scared of the future. Okay, so number one, here's a future that's much worse than anything we're experiencing right now, but it's in a book. So therefore it's kind of cheerful to read about it because at least it's in the book. It's the effect that you get, say you go on a fast for a day and breakfast is really, really good the next morning. So it may be very bad inside the book and it may not be so hot in your life either, but the book is worse. So then you look at your life and think, well, at least it's not the zombie apocalypse. So that's part of it. The other part is the ones that are more realistically based. You can look down the road and say, is that where we want to go? But I think that's more of an adult response. The other real plus for teenagers is mommy and daddy usually aren't there. So it's acting out, how would I make out on my own? And despite the sort of gruesomeness of the world, how am I going to do? How am I going to do? How am I going to survive? How am I going to do with my bow and arrow or whatever I have on hand? And because they're young adult novels, a lot of them, you can kind of count on the fact that the main character is still going to be alive at the end of the book. So that's pretty cheerful, I think.
And let's talk for a second about Twitter and about how you engage with it. Like when you're waiting in line at for a sandwich, do you find yourself tweeting?
No, I have a shameful confession to make. I don't know how to tweet on my phone. I haven't learned that yet. It takes us old people sort of a long time to learn new things. So I've worked up to tweeting on my computer. I actually have been given the gift of an iPad, which I'm gingerly approaching. I've walked around in circles and closed and backed away. I haven't quite got there yet. I'm working up to it.
And so I know that some novelists have found the internet to be such a distraction that they've gone to extreme means, like, you know, sticking super glue in the modem port so that they can't go online while they're working. But you're on Twitter on your laptop or on your computer.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't drag you away from other writing?
I have another computer.
Really? Do you have one that's on the internet and one that's not?
That's correct. I have a big screen to write on, and then I have a portable, I have an AirBook, a Mac Air, which I debated between that. I mean, you don't want to have another discussion about which form of technology is better and why you use it. But I can say that phones are getting bigger. For a long time, they got smaller. And then people realized they couldn't actually see anything on them. It is all, you know, connected to the size of the human eye and what you can see. So now they're getting a bit bigger again, and I think we're going to get a meld, something a bit smaller than an iPad, but bigger than an iPhone.
I believe, in fact, Apple was making that announcement like today, like about 20 minutes ago.
Did they make that announcement?
Yeah, I think it's called the Mini. See, once again, Margaret Atwood.
Oh, yeah, that's what I would have done, so there you go.
Once again, Margaret Atwood knows exactly what Apple is going to do before they do it.
Oh, I don't think so. But that's what you would want, isn't it? Especially read and write on your phone, you would actually want that.
Well, I know, yeah, I would. I'm just not sure what size, where I'm going to put it. I guess it'll go in my purse.
You don't know how big it is yet, do you? How big is it going to be?
I think it's 5.5 inch, 7.9. Oh, I thought it was 5.5.
So that's not very big. Yeah, that'll go in your purse. Where were you keeping your other one?
It goes in my purse.
There you are. So
Yeah. So one of our, I'm sure you've been asked this a zillion times, but one of our readers wanted to know who some of your favorite authors are, and maybe to put a spin on it, who are you reading now that you're enjoying?
okay, that's different.
It's slightly different.
The favorite authors, that would be a very long list because I'm very old. And they accumulate over the years. And once you start, then the list goes on. And
It's not like you're going to knock Kafka off, are you?
well, I could say Kafka. I mean, that would be on the list for sure, but so would a lot of other things. But what am I reading right now? I'm reading a book called The Blondes by Emily Schultz. And in The Blondes, there's glad you're redhead. There's disease of blondes, but only blonde women, and they go berserk and kill people.
Yes, I'm glad I'm a redhead too.
So that's one of those. This isn't actually going to happen. We hope books, but again, it's taking a premise and rolling out the consequences of that. One of which is a boom in brunette hair dye, as you might expect. Does it count if you're underneath a blonde but you dye it brown? Does that help or not? And what do we do about body hair? She gets into that as well.
I imagine that depilatories there would be a run on them.
A screaming run.
Yeah, a screaming run on depilatories.
Even if you
So,
are afraid of getting the disease, you don't want people to know that. They don't.
so,
Yeah.
so you're a former Booker Prize winner. Did you read any of the books that were in the running for the Booker this year?
Well, I reviewed the one that won.
You reviewed Bring Up the Bodies.
I did. I gave it a tippity-top review in The Guardian. We cannot get enough of those tutors. No matter that we know the plot, we know how it all comes out or off. And we get on and Bring Up the Bodies, we get to the part where Anne Boleyn's head comes off. And
Oh no! Spoiler!
yeah, spoiler, I told her. It comes off in different ways depending who you read or watch. So in the Tudors, the television series of the same name, it came off sort of in midair. I would like to know how they did that special effect. But in the Bring Up the Bodies, it comes off in a much sort of it comes off in a shoddier way.
It seems like that has been a bit of a theme that, like with Game of Thrones, like that he wanted to make what old time looked like be like dirty and kind of messy and shoddy in some ways.
The series called Rome was also good for that reason, because in the 50s when they did Rome movies, everything looked sort of sparkling white and clean and so on. And Rome is already old by the time Rome the series is set, so things are kind of grubby and falling apart as they would have been.
And even though you often write futuristic worlds, you also see them as being kind of grubby and falling apart sometimes, like in Oryx and Crake.
Well, most of the time. I think there was a moment when we were doing the future as a modernistic and everything was going to be streamlined, and Gotham City and Batman, it was all sort of modernistic architecture, but that didn't happen. What we got instead was what we have, which is a mix of some old and some new and some falling apart and some and that's the way things happen in real life.
I'm guessing that the third part in the Oryx and Crake trilogy is coming. Is it on the way?
It is indeed. It'll be out, unless I get run over by a bus. It will be out in the fall of 2013.
Well, I certainly hope you don't get run over by a bus.
I'm hoping that too, but or the zombie apocalypse. That might happen as well.
You just have to run faster and faster.
You think so? But if I
That's
run
what
really fast, I won't look where I'm going, and I'll get run over by a bus.
that would be terrible. So with Byliner, with with Positron, with the Byliner piece, if readers want to tell you to kill somebody off, or they want to make a significant change in the way the world works, or they want to push you on something, or just congratulate you, what's the best way to do that?
Probably right on the Byliner site,
Mm-hmm.
or Twitter, but on the Byliner site. The thing about Twitter is it rolls down like a scroll, so that if you're if you skip a few days, things may roll down out of your site, and you may never actually. I don't actually know how to make it go back up again. Um, I know there must be a way, but I haven't figured it out yet. And I do have this unfortunate bibliographer who went mad when I went on Twitter because he's trying to collect and archive all my tweets. Can you imagine the misery of that? Everything I write, so that's writing, okay? So either I would say the Byliner site itself is a good way of doing that. But we could also run a contest. We could run a contest and say, all right, but who should get tossed off the lifeboat? We could do that. But I'm not sure that I would be responsive to that. You know, Charles Dickens was urged not to kill off little Nell, but he paid no attention. He did it anyway.
Spoiler alert again, little Nell dies. So,
What Oscar Wilde said about that. He said, no one but a person what is it? Only a person with a heart of stone could read the death of little Nell without laughing.
that Oscar Wilde.
That Oscar.
So I know that we're going to have to let you go because you have to catch a plane, but I wonder.
That was yesterday.
Oh, well, then you can just stick around.
Yeah, that's right. Well, but you probably have to catch a plane.
No, I'm just going to hang out here. Maybe read a book. But I wonder, you just said, you just did this thing where you talked about maybe we could have a contest on the Byliner site. What kind of futures do you see for new kinds of writing or new kinds of engaging for authors to engage with their audience that might be fun or interesting?
Well, there's so much right now that you can spend your entire life engaging with your audience on all of these different sites, and you'd never actually get anything done. And the other thing about reading is, and I hate to be a spoil sport here, but readers engage with the book. And I'm not sure that they want the author popping in all the time, as I'm just doing on this chat with you. But you wouldn't want to have that at least I personally would not wish to have that every day. I would kill for the opportunity to have a half-hour conversation with William Shakespeare. But if William Shakespeare had a morning chat show every morning, I would probably think that was a bit too much. And then I would want him to get back to writing some plays or something.
You mean Good Morning Shakespeare is not the future of writing?
Don't think so. That would be my guess, yes.
So do you think that with all the projects that you have that use the internet and electronic means for communication and for distribution, is there anything with print that catches your eye?
Mostly things with print catch my eye because I'm a reader. And these other things, let's put it this way, my brother, as a young scientist, did his first experiment with mosquitoes. And he stuck his arm in the cage every day to feed them. So my experiments with electronic media are like sticking my arm in the cage. And I'm old enough so that if I mess up, it kind of doesn't matter. But I can come back and report to other people, other writers, about how well I think this stuff works and whether I think they should do it or not, because they are always asking, should I do this? They kind of don't want to, but should I? Do I have to? My publisher thinks I should do this. And some of them would really just honestly rather write. So I'm an experiment. I'll tell you what I think works for me once I've finished doing this experiment, and I'll tell you other things that didn't work so well, but might in the future. It's going to be always a matter of personal taste and preference. And so it is with readers, because readers are very individual people, and some of them will not go near an e-reader or the internet or anything. They want nothing but a paper book. Others have demolished all their paper books and they've put everything in electronic form. They're going to be in trouble when the solar flare hits and wipes all their electronic media, but never mind. People are making those choices. People are making those choices. Good thing about paper books is when the lights go out, if you've got a candle, you can still read. And they make great kindling.
If one is forced to. Well, Margaret Atwood, it has been such an honor and a pleasure to spend this time with you, and thank you for joining us at the Los Angeles Times.
And thank you. Oh, there's one thing. Since it's Los Angeles, I forgot to put this in. As soon as we put up the first Blindliner episode, which is called I'm Starved for You, we immediately got television series interest. So people are watching these forums. They're watching these new ways of publication. They have their eye on them.
Well, I think there's a lot of sex in it, right?
There's initially some, yes, there is a lot of sex. Because
Well,
the man from couple number one falls in love with the woman from couple number two who shares the house, but whom he has never seen. So initially he starts tracking her down to try to find out who she is, because he's developed this mad passion for her. And then he gets a stunning surprise at the end of episode 1. And in episode 2, he finds himself in a lot of trouble.
so I look forward to seeing Positron, the series, on pay cable.
So do I.
Thank you so much, Margaret Atwood. It has been such a pleasure.
And thank you.